I'd like to speak about an issue, but first I'd like to yield to the minority leader, Mr. McConnell.
Republican leader.
Madam President, I'm here in support of what our colleague from Arizona is going to be talking about shortly, and it's basically this. We have a White House that is busily at work trying to quiet the voices of those who oppose them by doing the following. They are proposing a new regulation directed at 501c4 organizations who've been active for over 50 years in expressing themselves about the issues of the day in our country. And this regulation actually predates the IRS abuses that we saw during the 2012 election. I've spoken about this a number of times, including a couple of major speeches at one of the think tanks here in town, about what a threat it is to citizens when the heavy hand of the IRS comes down on them because they speak up against policies of the government. This regulation that Senator Flake is going to speak about here in a few minutes that we'd like to see delayed for a year has generated 120,000 comments. I would say to my friend from Arizona, I'm told that there's been no regulation in the history of the IRS that's even approached 120,000 comments. Is that the understanding of the senator from Arizona?
That is. In fact, just to give some kind of scale here, the Keystone Pipeline, that's been extremely controversial for months and months. That has generated about 7,000 comments. 7,000 comments for an issue like that. This has generated north of 100,000.
And I think it's reasonable to assume, Madam President, that the reason for that is there are groups out there all across America, both on the right, on the left, and in the center, who've taken a look at this new regulation and understand that it's the federal government using the heavy hand of the IRS to try to shut them up, to make it impossible for them to criticize the government or people like the senator from Arizona and myself. It's none of the business of the government to be quieting the voices of the American people. Now, I know that our Democratic friends are upset because some conservative groups have been very active. I don't recall the same sense of outrage over the last 50 years when groups on the left were actively involved. And it looks to me like, I'd say to my friend from Arizona, since these comments are coming from all over, it appears, does it not, that there's a lot of collateral damage here, that the administration may have wanted to target their enemies, but they're hitting some of their friends as well.
That is correct. Many of the organizations that have sounded alarm bells here are organizations like the ACLU, Sierra Club, and others, social welfare organizations that advocate for policy as well, who are concerned that this goes too far.
The final thing I would say to my friend from Arizona, we have a new commissioner of the IRS. He has an opportunity, does he not, to clean up an agency that's already in a lot of trouble because of the IRS scandals, because of the new responsibility they've been given to enforce Obamacare. This is an agency in trouble already before you wade into a political thicket like this, particularly when it appears as if this whole regulation really originated at the White House, not at the IRS. And I'm reminded that the commissioner of IRS during the Nixon administration was asked by the White House to help target President Nixon's enemies, and the commissioner of the IRS said no. No, Mr. President. And I wonder if my friend from Arizona agrees with me that the appropriate response of the new commissioner of the IRS responsible for cleaning up this troubled agency ought to be to the White House, no. I'm not going to participate in your effort to quiet the voices of your political foes.
I would certainly agree. If the IRS wants to establish or reestablish credibility that has been lost, then the commissioner should say to the White House, I will act independently here. And to go forward with this rule after what has gone on would simply be going the other direction and would be seen, and I think justifiably so, to be working hand in glove with the White House to stifle free speech.
Well, Madam President, I just want to commend the senator from Arizona for his leadership on this very important issue. I don't think there's anything more important to our democracy than First Amendment freedom of speech. And the last thing an agency whose principal responsibility is to collect revenue for the federal government, the last thing an agency like that needs to be involved in is quieting the voices of the critics of this administration, or any other administration for that matter. So, Madam President, I yield the floor.
I thank the gentleman from Kentucky, and I certainly echo his comments.